Welcome everybody. This is the AutoEnter ReEnter Roundup. It's not AutoEnter Live, obviously. It's no longer live. These are all just pre-recorded items. Well, you know what? A lot of it was pre-recorded anyway. but it's no longer a live event. But we're actually doing a little roundup of what our favorite videos were, favorite presentations. And discussing those for the next hour or so. And hopefully by the end of this, we'll have a list of favorite presentations that people can go back and review. And maybe if there's some of those people you want to come back and speak at DIGFM so they can give a full 90-minute presentation or whatever it is, because a lot of those presentations were only 30 minutes, maybe just barely to get an introduction to a topic. So if you want to see more on that topic or more of that presenter, we can invite them into DIGFM at a later time. All right, well, let's go ahead. Anybody got anything burning that they wanted to share? I could
jump in. I thought the most consequential talk that was given was the Robert Holsey one, What's Next for the Claris platform. Claris has been giving several talks about what Claris Studio is going to look like. And for the last, half dozen presentations that I've seen, it was just this basic, forms application or forms tool. It wasn't even an application really. It was just the ability to add forms to MongoDB and then mount those in ESS. And what they showed at AutoEnter was, basically, it's not super functional, but, it is certainly the beginnings of a full application development environment. They have what they're calling a hub, which is like a main menu with tiles. You can do dashboards, you can do charting, you have a spreadsheet view. They have some master detail views. And it was light years ahead of what they'd been showing, and to the point where I actually stopped into the Claris Expo time and said, you guys have been sandbagging on us because this thing is so far ahead of where it's been. And I can't help but feel like it hurt their efforts with the problem solver circle initially, because when the problem solver circle was rolled out, what we had was a forms tool. And if anyone didn't need a forms tool, the thought process would be something like, well, that's interesting and all, but it's beta and it's just a forms tool and my client doesn't need that. So, maybe the value isn't there. But this completely changes that calculus for people if they're looking to push content out to the web. And I call this, serving up data at the data edge. If your customer who's running FileMaker has in turn their own customers who need, task status updates or shipping tracking numbers or order confirmations or invoice aging or anything like that, this is now capable of those sorts of functions. And this is historically stuff we've had to, spin up our own websites to do and maybe push it out to MySQL or something like that. And so this is kind of a game changer. I thought it was the most consequential presentation at the whole event.
And yes, over double the viewership of the next one on the list. The public agrees.
So I'll jump in and speak for the second one on the list.
Okay, wait a second. Are there any more comments on the Tech Talk, or what's next for the Claris platform? Anybody else have anything to say about that?
I agree.
Agree with Chris as well, but I was extremely surprised to see where they were at with it. So it's like, wow.
I'm going to jump in too. Robert Holsey was at the FileMaker research group that meets monthly, and it was really, really outstanding there too. He actually went a little further and showed a little more of, what they're working on, whether it's released or not, I don't know, but definitely a game changer. And I'm sure that video, which unfortunately was not the full hour, I'm sure that video will be posted. And
So it's not up yet.
I don't think so.
Where do people find those videos from the research group?
Yeah, I'm going to post the link to the research group.
You're going to drop that in the chat?
Yep.
Yeah, I attend every once in a while. What's the research group about, by the way? It's academic, right?
Yes, there's a lot of people who do research at universities or, other studies, and so it's mostly academic. And it's people who have other jobs and also doing FileMaker to make their job better. So it's really a nice group, and if you want to join their meeting, certainly get on their list. They're on LinkedIn and I think Meetup, to be able to join their group and see attend their meeting. And it puts a little different perspective, I think, on what some people are doing than just, the general, everybody does, contact manager. This is not just contact manager. So I think it's a pretty great group.
Yeah. Is that it for the what's next on the platform? Claris platform?
I told Robert he's putting me out of a job by introducing all those charts and
Well,
data tables and such. Huh?
that's only part of what JavaScript does, right? Well, we'll get to you next, somewhere here down the road. You're not too far down the list, actually. Tony, do you want to share about what transactions you said?
Yeah, so there were two presentations about transactions, and I liked them both. Just going sequentially here, the FileMaker transactions that Danny Mac presented, I liked it because he did two things in it. One, he took a look at the future, and the other thing he did is he did a good demonstration of how to do transactions in the current product, because transactions is coming, but it hasn't shipped. So he covered the present and the future, and I thought that one was skillful. The other thing on transactions, which I also liked, was it's on the screen that you have up, number 4, where Wim and Todd did an interview with Doug Wallace and Clay Mackel, where they, Clay and Doug talked about what's coming, which I thought was really, really interesting, coming straight from the engineers. So I thought that was exciting.
And that's coming out of FileMaker Pro, huh?
Yes, that's my understanding, subject to correction. I'm not the greatest future predictor, but yeah, and it's all recorded, and Clay is apparently he is on the FileMaker team, as opposed to, they have different products in the product line. So he's he's on the FileMaker platform team as opposed to the FileMaker Connect team or whatnot. I guess he's probably involved in everything too. But anyway, I like both the presentations, and that's all I know.
Vince, did you see either of those presentations?
Yeah, I watched both of them. I was surprised actually that usually you go to a conference and Claris is talking about some future stuff, but I was surprised how openly they've been discussing a new feature that's coming. Mind you, they're also in this agile process where every roughly three to 4 months they're releasing a new version, and so they're moving very quickly. But yeah, so that's surprising. And transactions are very, very cool.
Yeah, you gave a couple presentations on transactions. How did those compare
Yeah,
to your presentation?
Well, I mean, transaction presentations that I gave were basically using the method that exists currently, which is as long as a record is open, and you do the and you modify data, related data through a portal, then as long as you don't commit anything, you can put another value in the record that you're in to relate to, and continue modifying related data that way. And then when you're done, you just commit, and then that commit will commit everything. But in the new paradigm, basically, yeah, just like you have an if and an end if block, or loop and end loop block in scripting, you'll have a open transaction and commit transaction, and that's a script block, and within that block, any CRUD operations are all kind of in this in memory until you get to the commit transaction, or if for whatever reason you want to revert, you can revert, and everything goes back to the way it was. And there's a revert transaction, I think it's called revert transaction step as well. So I think three things
Now the two things I just posted in the chat now are both your presentations, by the way.
Okay,
in case anybody wanted to refer to those.
Yeah, like I'm fascinated to see how the community will kind of start using transactions, mostly because you know what transactions gives us, which is all or nothing, basically. Like you can get to do all the CRUD operations you want, and you know if something fails because a record is locked or validation doesn't succeed, then you can roll everything back, which is, I mean, in my opinion, that's going to simplify code, because most of the time people are writing defensive code, which is set field and then, you know, check if you had an error, and, you know, and it can get very opaque in terms of like trying to see the code and what it's doing. And I think with transactions will give us an opportunity to have code that is a lot simpler to read. And so anyway, that's a real positive in my opinion. But it's going to be interesting to see how people will work with editing records, because you know there's different techniques out there that people use. Like I know at Beeswax, what we use is like a local file editing approach, where you load the data into a locally deployed file, and then you open up a card window, and then you edit all that data. So there's no traffic on the network. And then when you're done, you press you know, save, and it packages everything up and sends it to the server to be transacted. Now, in the new method, like I wonder how people will want to have the ability for the user to edit all the different records, or you know, people will just choose to, you know, have an ability to edit a single record and commit it, but that's no value, not much value in terms of transactions.
So now the presentations you give, would you say they were like just more expanded versions of what Danny Mac gave, or they have different approaches then?
Yeah, I think more expanded, I would say.
Tony's raising his hand.
Excuse me, I'm just gonna get some water. I'll be right back.
All right,
good.
I'll hold my question. There's something that I picked up from one of Vince's presentations. When he comes back.
The one with or without the mustache?
There are a couple people with raised hands.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Who else? Got Stephen?
Yep, that's me. I was just ruminating about a feature request that I think FileMaker could help us with. You know, in the layout setup options, there's a checkbox that says automatically save, or commit your record or whatever it is. If they would give us control over the output of that, or like a trigger on commit, we could then actually allow a user to interact with a record and only click a button that we designate to run our action, do a validation, or whatever it needs to do. And if we could have that feature, it would allow us to not have to have global fields or global stables and then transfer the data back and forth. They could actually create a record, enter all the data, and then if they cancel, it would just wipe it all away and revert. Just a thought.
Now, on that one presentation for where they're talking about transactions in 19.6, are they addressing any of that or no? Not yet.
I think the big progress forward with transactions, as far as I can tell, is that it's tied to Windows, so it's a little easier to implement than the current method. That was just my takeaway.
Yeah, it's tied to a single window. So if you're running a script and you create a new window, in the new window, anything that you do in that new window is not part of that transaction.
So that does offer a lot of. So Vince, I'm glad you're back, because I wanted to say one of the things I picked up from your presentation on your presentations, because I saw two of them, I think, prior to AutoEnter, is this distinction that you've made between transactions being, all or nothing, or another good thing is to be able to build up a stack of data entry, as I understand it, such that when you commit and maybe I'm misunderstanding, so that when you commit, you're doing like one big push across the network as opposed to, multiple pushes.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of, like, another talk that was done at AutoEnter, Carl had 2 sessions, and he talked about the release debug flags and how, what information you're able to gather from that. Very, very interesting, and I would definitely recommend watching those 2 talks by Carl. But
were those
Carl with a K, I think.
Yeah, right there, Carl.
Part 1, part 2.
Oh, you just passed it.
I did.
Passed it. Yeah. One more.
That was good stuff. He did a presentation for
visualizing
Chicago.
Network communication. Yeah. So if you use the release debug flags on a hosted file and you watch what happens when you either create a record or edit a record, you'll see the network. You'll see the traffic going on right now. What's interesting with transactions is there's less traffic. It's a little bit more lightweight, but there's still traffic. So if you have a lot of records that you want to create over a WAN, it's still not going to be super fast. And people might feel it even more, just because if you have a high latency, it's gonna amplify that problem more. So anyway, how do I say this? I think again, one of the other benefits of transactions is allowing us to also do things where we denormalize data. So for whatever reasons people have for complex solutions, they might want to store some redundant data in a related table, so that they don't have to then have a relationship to pull the related data from a parent or grandparent record. And so with this technique, one will be able to do such things. And there's another point why using transactions is helpful is to move away from unstored calcs. But the challenge there is that when you're using transactions, you how do I say, you can't use FileMaker aggregate functions on newly created, or edited records. Until they're committed, you don't have access to that data, and so you can't use like count or sum or anything like that. So that's going to be a big challenge that people will have to figure out different ways to get around that and solve that. But anyway, interesting.
Yeah, that's an interesting topic. To Eric's point, maybe that's a bit of a drill down topic, and because you bump into record locking, so there's trade-offs there. I'd be willing to say a few good words for unstored calcs in a variety of different use cases. I think there's strong arguments to be made on both sides there. Big topic.
So are we saying we want another presentation on transactions then, or at DIGFM?
Well, I'm actually preparing another talk because I'm speaking at some other events on transactions in 19.6, seeing as things are moving quickly in that direction. So yeah, I'll have a follow-up presentation about it.
Okay. And your presentation at DIGFM is going to be the best one, right?
Yes.
All right. I don't know if there's anything else to say about transactions or the transaction presentations at this point. Oh, Chris?
Yeah, so I never use we'll do it like an AA meeting here. My name is Chris and I never use transactions. I just never find a use for it. I mean, the typical use case for me is that someone is creating a new record, customer record or an invoice record or an order record or whatever it is, and the phone rings or they get interrupted by somebody and they need to leave the thing half done. That happens all the time. They can have a contact half entered. And so I never enforce transaction completeness because that's just not how the workflows work for the customers we've worked with. And that, going back decades now, where I think transactions are really useful is where you have to interact with other systems. If I need to push something to an accounting system or interact with an API or push it to, MySQL web backend somewhere, then I'm really interested in making sure everything that I meant to push over got where it was going. But the transaction techniques and functionality, that have been trotted out over the years and that we talked about at AutoEnter don't work for those cases. When you're interacting with another system and I'm trying to push into 3 or 4 tables in, say, MySQL, how do you, holding open, a portal record or any of these other, opening a transaction in the latest version of 19 doesn't help you if you're doing ODBC stuff, really, unless I'm missing something, or if I'm doing multiple API calls. And I need to push it here and here and here and here, and I need to make sure all those worked. The transaction logic tools that we have don't really help me there.
Yeah, you get a good point, Chris, with the integration with different systems. I haven't thought of that, and so I'm not sure how that will play out. But I can say that the approach that we're taking has been really helpful for solutions that need to work on a WAN, and people are struggling with performance because when we have like a record or a batch of records or kind of a group of records, you can get all that data replicated or cached locally, and there's no network traffic so the user just basically edits anything they want, and it's super fast because it's all local, and there's no network traffic, and the record is not locked for an endless, kind of period of time. So when it all gets sent to the server and gets transacted, it's a fraction of the time to lock the record. Make the changes, lock the record, and you're done. So, I mean, we've been using it for a lot of different systems, just because we have a lot of users that are over a WAN kind of connection.
I'm not saying it's not useful. I'm just saying the cases where I would actually need it, the tools don't seem to help me. But you raise a great point in that intermittent connectivity. If I have to build a FileMaker Go app that's going to go out in the field and may or may not be within range of internet connectivity, you know, most of the time when you come back to the mothership, you want to sync that up. And in that case, I think transactions are absolutely useful.
Stathis, I see you had your hands up.
Yes, hello everyone. Just want to share that from my understanding, the intended use of the new transaction steps, the open transaction, commit transaction, and revet transaction, is from my point of view is basically for back-end scripting, because they still have the same limitations with a on-record commit technique. As Vince said, you cannot see related data that is not yet, they were not loaded when you loaded the record. But it's pretty powerful if you're building API stuff and you need to be sure that everything is right before you send it, and you need to do it in a batch. This is where the new transaction steps kick in. And I think they're going to be pretty powerful for anyone that creates integrations. But they are still tied to the layout, and I'm pretty sure that they're also tied to the script, meaning that you cannot go to a subscript, because it's similar to the loop and if and if. It needs to be in the same script.
You can have different scripts running. You can call subscripts and everything. So you can have a very complex script flow. The script block, the transaction block that originated in the parent script or whatever. If your subscripts are doing CRUD operations and one of them fails, it will return back to the originating script where the transaction block was, and go directly to the commit transaction step and abort. So you can have subscripts.
I meant that you cannot revert transaction from a subscript, for example. It needs to be in the same script.
Correct. Yeah, correct.
And also, Vince, running your subscripts, will the subscripts be able to themselves use the open and end transaction bookends script steps, or
no? Well, you only have one open transaction per client. So like if you're running a transaction, you can't, like, you can call a subscript, and the subscript, if you call another open transaction, it won't, you'll get an error. You can't open another transaction. So you only have one active per client.
Yeah, and I'm okay with not being able to open one. It's just I want to be sure that I control when it closes, basically, because today the way I'm rolling out transactions, oftentimes I'm nesting scripts that by themselves are transactions. You know, I build them as building blocks, and sometimes I'm going to call just like this subcomponent that's going to do the transaction, and sometimes I'm going to call like a larger, more complex operation that handles the whole chain of transactions in one transaction. But that really relies on the ability to have those steps control, okay, is the transaction still going on? Do I need to end the transaction in each of those scripts and subscripts?
This is great conversation, y'all, but let's save it for Vince's presentation, and let's get back to the AutoEnter, because there are a lot of other really good presentations people want to comment on.
Yeah. Cool. Thanks, Beverly.
All right. Well, you know what? I know we were going through the most popular on the list there, but somebody brought up the presentations about the visualizing network communication.
I did.
By Carl.
And I
wonder
wanted
if we
to say
could
one
get
more.
more comments on that.
I wanted to say one other thing in the talk that Clay did about transactions. One other thing is that he did mention something. I don't remember now if it was in that or if it was in the the unrecorded session where Clay was talking. Anyway, Claris is feeling that once they roll out transactions, they're going to be like surprised with all the different ways that people come up with that they did not intend to, that people would use it, like a little bit like plugins in the early days. Like, what, you're doing what with a plugin? So anyway, it'll be interesting times. So back to Carl. Yeah. Tony, did you watch Carl's presentation?
I attended. Carl presented at the Chicago user group, and I believe it was the earlier version of the content, and therefore I watched the stuff that I hadn't seen in the user group. So I guess the answer would be yes, I saw it earlier, but no, I didn't see it. And maybe just to round it out, I'm sure it was awesome.
Yeah.
I remember his presentation to Chicago was really cool. Network. I kind of wish I had a system running slow. There's a little bit of a joke there. I just can't.
Anybody else here watch Carl's presentations at AutoEnter and have something to say about it?
There's two of them too.
Yeah.
I'd recommend them.
Yeah.
I'm curious why his part one is twice as popular as his part two.
I think that's usually the way it goes.
Well, there could be some people who just started. So, I don't care.
Yeah. And it's not for everybody because it's like network traffic, and if every system you build runs incredibly fast, it doesn't apply. Once again, a joke.
Well, no, I mean that's kind of the case. We used to have our server just like right next to everybody who did their work, and so a lot of our early development didn't account for WANs or anything else. So almost anything went, and now we're more careful than we used to be. But yeah, it's like when you've got a fast network and the server's right next to you, a lot of stuff doesn't matter.
I do think
what's interesting.
Sorry, go ahead.
Sorry, go ahead. I was going to say, with release debug, and the way Carl has it, is that I don't know the mechanics of this file because I haven't downloaded it and looked at it, but at least what I've been doing is just reading from that dbdebug.log output, and so I set a marker as to where it is right now. Then I do some actions, and then I'll read from that point in the file till the next point, and then I'll have all the calls to and from, and then I'll look at all those, and then I'll flatten it, and I'll get a sense of how much traffic sent and received, and on the number of calls that were done. So this is a great tool if, let's say, you're refactoring a system where they have a layout they're going to and it's very slow, and then you build a new version of it and you can compare like a before and after, like here, look, client, we improved the performance on this layout. It's like fewer calls, less traffic. And so I mean, I've been wanting Claris to really have tools like one would have like in Safari Debug, where all the great things that you can break down on a website and see like how long this image takes to load, etc. Like tools like that to break down like a FileMaker layout, like, oh, how come this layout is slow, and but this is as close as we've ever gotten to be able to decipher all that. I mean, there's top call stats, but if anyone ever really used top call stats, it's just a lot harder to pour through, and you can't really use it in a very busy environment. Anyway.
Well, for that matter, it'd be nice, just some of those basic progress bars that you see, you know that there's multiple steps going on in a find or something else, and you go, why is that taking so long? It could break it down like, oh, it's doing this and now it's doing that.
Yeah.
I like the tools. One thing that I think about is the same problem, just coming at it from kind of an opposite side. Every time someone in the FileMaker community tests a feature or an implementation, a particular way of doing something, and kind of reports back, I'm like, this runs fast or this runs slow. I think it helps because in my fantasy world, I would know ahead of time how to code something such that it runs fast. And just one example, like when I put a portal on a layout, just because I went to a bunch of developer conferences, I'll typically put 25 rows because I remember hearing that like that's the number of rows that FileMaker Claris product downloads. There's a ton of stuff that I don't know the answer to. What does an SVG render faster than a PNG? But I do think that tool is good, and I got to play around with it with my new laptop that's coming in a couple days. Good stuff.
Yeah. If we're ready to move on, I have a couple of the presentations that I really liked. Well, I liked all of them actually, but Vanessa Constanzo's presentation, she actually did two, but she did one where she was talking about the different groups of people in your company that they're, your work group or however, you may be several companies working together on a project and trying to work together with the different peaks. Not the WIDFM, but the other one. Yeah, managing multi-generational, that one was very good. And she makes a lot of really good points that are helpful for anybody. But I think I see a lot of us sticking around, even though we're probably, past our prime, and then we have a lot of new people coming up. And it's really good to kind of work together and learn from each other, actually. So I thought that was a pretty good presentation. Then the other one, which I did not catch at the event, was by Albert at Smallco. And I'd seen Albert many, many times in presentations. I worked with him on a couple projects even long time ago. And so I said, okay, it's Albert. I know what he's going to say. And I am kicking myself because I've watched the video he did and then somebody from his company that they did. And I wish I had been there when he was doing the video to watch that chat going by and the questions afterward, because I thought it was really, really excellent. He came up with a lot of good points. He's changed sort of the way that they work, and I think it's a really, really good video.
You're talking about the Fight Fair one? There's this one by Albert.
Yeah, I think that's the one by Albert and his group. And then there's another one by Smallco, which is kind of the second part two of that a little bit.
Let's see. Maybe.
Really, what other highlights about it that you really liked?
Of Albert's presentation?
Yeah.
Yeah, like I said, I've known Albert for a lot of years and worked with him and kind of know his thing is design. and he's excellent. And you know, you go to one of his classes and you just learn so much from him. And now he's working with a group of people that said it's not all design, and so he's having to take this step and say, yes, you're right. And he sort of changed how their groups work together, and I think the dynamics of his group is really great. It was just interesting to see that change.
You're saying he didn't really cover much design on this one?
No, he did not. No.
Well, that kind of well, okay, yeah. I guess to comment on some of the ones you just mentioned, I did actually, I think, forget who recommended. It might have been you, but I was elsewhere and somebody had suggested the multi-generational workforce. And coincidentally, where I work, they were doing some IT, like an IT convention among the California State Universities, and the theme there was a lot of inclusion related presentations. And I'd have to say that Vanessa's actually superior to a lot of the ones that I saw, and it was good. It was, and it just gave you, without beating you over the head with anything, she just let you know what the value is in having that. So, and then if nobody had anything else to say on those ones, the fact that you mentioned design, I want to bring up that I guess there was only one design presentation. Is that right?
I think so, and it was very good too.
Yeah, that was I started to watch that. I haven't finished it. But Eric Storbank? Can't see how. Storbank? I don't know him. Has anybody seen his stuff before?
I think he occasionally writes a blog, contributes to the support group blog. I have to go back and look. I think he might often be the author of things over there.
But yeah, there was a lot of tools. I mean, like tip number 3 on there was like you just making use of Google's icon library and things like that. So I said, oh, okay.
That was my favorite of the 5 tips that he had. I commented on his YouTube with a timestamp link, so people could jump straight to my favorite tip there.
Oh, good. Yeah, it was mine too. I actually hadn't got past that one.
Yeah, I looked at the library. There's some really, really cool stuff there. I mean, it's like super extensive.
Yeah, because it's kind of tough. It's like, I know, if you haven't purchased one of your own, like to start scouring the web for icons, and it's nice that they have just a huge pile of them that look fairly standardized too. So,
Wonder if Korn's talk on SimpleQ would fit into what Vince was saying about, grouping stuff all together to make the transaction. If that would kind of play into that as well.
Yeah, I mean, Korn is a funny character. I think if you watch the talk, I can't remember now in his first slide, I think he referred to himself to like I'm an intern or something like that. Anyway, it's quite the character, and he's extremely intelligent, and yeah, the thing I think that he was talking about was SimpleQ. That's the thing that that's published and subscribe, I believe it is, and
is it a product?
I don't know if it's a product or if it's a free. I don't know enough about it, but I think it's like something that it's free, right? And they have it on. They have a link to it, and you can download it and kind of implement it. But this idea that instead of keeping things up to date, let's say, you just push out some information that some other part of your system subscribes to, and watches out for.
Yeah.
So anyway, I'm not doing it justice, but to your comment, Beverly, yes, it probably dovetails into, especially in the discussion of transactional integrity or eventual integrity. So definitely worth.
Sorry.
Yeah, I just posted the link to the GitHub. Oh, Chris, sorry, Chris, featured by half a minute.
It's good.
Hey, I watched that one, Simple Q. It seemed to be kind of a follow-on presentation of something that Todd Geist presented to the Los Angeles group, the FM Disk, where my understanding is that it's essentially a worker queue that you might use, for example, to populate inventory updates so that you could have them updating your inventory record and, blocking and avoiding record lock, because it's like if you can't update the inventory, then just try it on the next loop. So I looked at a worker queue, and one of the other things that was interesting when Todd presenting, and I'm kind of assuming it's sort of the same evolutionary product because they're working together, is the record queue included calls to web apps. And I think that's where the pub sub comes in, whereby you would make you would put something in the queue that would be targeted to post to an API, and then you would gather the result back. But, I'm probably not doing it justice either. I think it's an interesting presentation that I did attend, both of them actually. And we're doing a queue, record queue to manage some complicated inventory for a particular project. Inventory's hard. A lot of record lockings, a lot of people selling the same product same time. Got to keep those numbers up to date. I thought that was worth watching.
Well, that's it on Simple Q. I have a question. How many people here actually presented at AutoEnter?
I did.
Who? Oh yeah, Vince. That's right. But he didn't present on transactions. What did you
Nope.
present?
Jeremy did.
Jeremy did. Who's first?
Hey, Jeremy, I've seen your presentation to the user groups. Did you present, and I'll confess that I didn't, was your presentation the same, or as you, awesome presentation, did you do the same topic, or was it a different? You've got this amazing development environment, which is really impressive for JavaScript integrations.
No, this was just showing with proper modern tools how easy it is to use JavaScript and FileMaker. That's all. It was using the environment, but and a charting template that I worked out for people to just come in, and because we only had 25 minutes, I promised that I would implement a chart into a fresh app in 25 minutes or less. And while I did it, I also cut out a bunch of stuff because,
25 minutes.
Yeah, it's 25 minutes. But
What did you cut out?
oh, just like sometimes things took a minute to load, or I wasn't cutting out any steps. I just cut out some of the in-between stuff. I'm trying to think. I had to shorten it so that I could get it in there. But it was just showing that you can use JavaScript, you can implement it, this charting library that I have, this charting template that I have using the development environment, people could take it and in half an hour or so implement it into their app, passing it some summary data. It's got the template that I provide or that I had in the presentation, which is available on my GitHub, is I'll find it here and put it. But it's easy. It's rather easy to implement. I have directions, and the video shows how to do that. So it was just a way to show that it's actually easy to use JavaScript, and I will die on the hill that it is much easier and more efficient to work in VS Code than it is in a text field when you're writing JavaScript. So I'm out to convince everybody of that. So yeah, so that's what it was about. 25 minutes to put a chart from a template into an app. Yeah. I'll, for the fun of it, I'll put the link to the charting template in the
Hey,
yeah.
Jeremy, do you have of the different user group presentations that you've done? And I lost count, but I think you did like 3 or 4 at least. Do you have a favorite of the recorded ones to point people to when you had the full hour to work with, or the full? Can you
Actually,
pick a favorite?
He didn't.
I don't remember. There's
We did one. Did you do one for DIGFM? I guess that's the default answer here, right?
He doesn't
Okay,
have an
never
answer.
mind.
Yeah.
Okay, all right. Silly of me to ask. Yeah, that was the best. I remember now.
And I have this JSON FM site that I'm really working hard. Oh, here's the template. Okay, here's the directions. There's just some these directions follow the video and allow you to walk through the steps of pushing a chart into your into your app pretty quickly. So yeah, that was what it was about.
Jeremy, here's a question. Here's a real question. Do you have an opinion on what is the most efficient way to deploy JavaScript code? And maybe some of the, maybe it's a big charting library, or maybe it's the calendar charting, or because there's different ways to get JavaScript code into FileMaker, right? You can do it in scripts. You can have, hey, correct me if I'm wrong here. I'm not the expert. You are. You could have JavaScript library on a layout, and you get layout attribute. Is there one that is faster than the others if you're deploying, or they're all like speed don't matter whether you do it with a script or a layout object, in your opinion?
Well, if you mean the action of deploying,
The
fastest
speed, not how well. I mean, how fast you deploy it is obviously important. I'm curious, like, what type of deployment would be the fastest when people use it? From the user point of view. That's what I mean.
Well, unless you're going to put code up online and have a web viewer read that code, the fastest way is the method that the add-ons use to deploy it, and the way that I'm doing the work that I do, the JavaScript development environment. It deploys it to a text field in a table. You can anywhere you want that text field to be, and the web viewer can read from that field from a script.
Well, yeah, I didn't mention that one. Okay, yeah, so
it's fast because this environment that I have set up, you run a little command and it takes care of it for you. It puts the text in the field. If you were going to deploy to a script, you would have to take all your code from VS Code. You would have to maybe minify it, and then you would have to copy and paste it over to a insert text script step, and then run that. Perfectly possible, or an object on a layout, but neither one of those are automatic.
So text in a field, and then if you're going to swap out config variables, you pick the text out of the field, swap out the config variables, and you're off to the races, something like that?
No, I mean, I would advocate for, if you want to change your configuration of your widget, then you just go to your VS Code code base, you make the changes, and I actually demonstrated that in the video, and you redeploy it. So yeah, I talk about this every Wednesday in my office hours.
All right.
But
Cool.
yeah, that's what I showed. That's the point of that. And my goal is to make this as easy as possible for people to work with JavaScript. So that's why it's called what it's called.
Any other outstanding presentations that you saw live or went back to and want to discuss or?
Well, I was
you
going
know,
to say
promote?
mission accomplished, Jeremy. And
Yeah.
oh, and then on the
Thanks.
well, he presented on JavaScript. Was there any other JavaScript related presentations going on?
Don did one on carafe implementation of data tables. I was actually going to do a data tables one and a charting one, but Don was wanted to do the work, and it was good to have two different people and two different approaches, so that's cool.
Now, what is that tool that she had, like a resource that she was able to bring in to do all that? What was that called?
That was carafe. That was from Soliant. They have a development. I haven't used it a whole lot, but it actually builds stuff in scripts. So they have an automated process to create script steps, I think, that generates the code. So I know it is possible to create script steps via XML or whatever, but yeah, that was Don's presentation. And then, I mean, the one at the very top, Eric Luce from Proofgeist, I used to work with him, talked about building a next level web app. It's interesting because now that I'm kind of independent, I am independent on my own, I see what's going on in many shops, and I'm seeing a lot of web apps being built with FileMaker backends. And the people that I've talked to are using exactly what Eric and the Proofgeist team are using. They're using Next.js, they're using Tailwind CSS, and they're using FileMaker as a backend, using the data API to update. So I'm doing that for 3 projects right now. My website is built with Next and using FileMaker as a CMS for like my courses and stuff. But this is a lot, and I assume many people here's shops or they're doing this too. So it's actually a big movement in the FileMaker platform. With or without Claris Studio, this is what people are asking for. Build me a website, let the data come from FileMaker and be sent back to FileMaker. So, Vince, are you doing Next stuff at Beeswax? Is Beeswax doing anything like that? Any Next stuff?
I'd have to check. I don't know, and I'm not involved in projects with the web necessarily.
Okay, but that's a big thing, and I've become 100 times better of a web developer than I was a year ago. So it's amazing how fast one has to learn that stuff.
So on Eric's presentation for the next level web app, did they cover a lot of JavaScript there too, or is something else?
It was more the authentication stuff, the APIs that Next.js allows you to build that you can then hit the FileMaker data API. He did spend a lot of time dealing with authentication. So when people and I think Todd did this too in his presentation, they kind of had sister presentations. They didn't show JavaScript because that wasn't the important part. The important part was how my Next.js app can reach back into FileMaker and how Next.js themselves, that platform makes it so easy to do it. So Next.js is a static site builder, but you don't have to have it to be static. All of my code, all of my content on my website is static, and I can publish it when I want to my website from my FileMaker file. That's a little bit different than like someone logging in and filling in a form and sending the form data back. But Eric primarily focused on how these two interact with each other. So that was good.
Yeah. I want to step in here, and what Jeremy is saying is that he's got the content and he just publishes it. And I want to note that this is not a new concept. When we first started DIGFM many moons ago, and I took over as web person for the group. That's exactly how I did the DIGFM website. It was all static in FileMaker, and I just would make changes in FileMaker and just up, FTP or whatever the pages that changed. And, new meeting come along, it's just a matter of pushing another page. It was pretty sweet.
This is a bit different in that I'm not pushing an entire page. I'm pushing just the content.
Right.
But I'm not pushing any HTML. All of that and all of the JavaScript is still coded into my my code. It's just FileMaker is just sending a list of courses or a list of the schedule or
Right. But
so.
it's kind of the same concept. It's that you're pushing stuff from FileMaker, and you're letting the coding on the other side where you already have your JavaScript and CSS and other stuff. It's then taking that and pushing out the pages. But yeah.
The page that I put in the chat, integrating magic / AutoEnter presentation, all of the content comes from FileMaker, and I could go and change it in a second and it would disappear. I could put misspellings in there, which I usually do, but this is a prime example. It's static. You can search it on Google, but I can update it at any time I want. So
yeah, pretty sweet.
That's what Eric is doing and Proofgeist is doing, and Todd. They're building web apps like this, which I think is happening a lot in our community now.
Yeah, I think web apps don't have to be all dynamic. When you look at like WordPress and the content is put up there and it's on the website, and you change the content on the website and in that database, and so it's a little more complex, but it's still pretty sweet.
So Next.js, is that taking the market share from React? Is that a competitor successor to React, or is it a different animal?
Next.js is React, but they provide it's a file-based routing system where you put pages and HTML pages and files in a certain folder, and then you're building your route there. Obviously it does more. They have an API that you can reach to other systems. But it uses React as well. So it's React is you code in React, but you're using the Next.js framework and some tweaks that they've made to React.
And is it, if I'm hearing correctly, what people are saying, is the data held in a separate file than the code for the most part, as opposed to being like in an old school website, the data and the code would be intermingled?
Yeah, I mean, my website is all that. All the data comes from FileMaker. Other projects that I'm working on, events, schedules, people's expenses and time entries, they can enter them in the web app, and then it sends back to FileMaker. So all of the data is coming from the attached FileMaker file or files. But yeah, I don't think I have any data in mind. I might, like, headers are hard coded into my HTML, but anything that you see is like a list of data or cards or whatever on my site, especially, it's all coming from FileMaker.
Well, it seems like an interest. I haven't seen that one, but that sounds like a fun one to watch.
And it's not an API call like a lot of websites are. So you're not reaching into FileMaker to do your query and get back results.
Yeah, a lot of.
Right.
I mean, I did on my Ranky Dink website, a lot of the contents for functions and script steps back when I maintained it was, came straight out of FileMaker, and it was pushed up once, and it, there's no live connection between the database and that's fast,
Actually, in that session, there were two topics that were amazing. The one was they were using Data API to query the schema, so the web developer can have that autofill functionality in their coding editor, which was great. But for me, the best feature that they demonstrated was a caching mechanism that basically, from the web side of things, you would specify an amount of seconds, for example, that cache would live in the website of things. So your FileMaker data backend is not getting so many queries. It was great. I really enjoyed that session.
Yeah,
Totally agree.
but he also showed, I think Todd showed that you can actually build it, you can construct it so that you're pushing it from FileMaker on your choice. And that's what I'm doing. My website doesn't touch my FileMaker database. It's the other way around, only when I need to change some content. And that's because my content doesn't change that often. So there's two ways to do it. And Next.js is very nice about that. They give us two ways to do the work there.
Push or pull. You could either push it or pull it.
Yep. Yeah. But pulling it, you could give it any number of seconds, 5 days worth of seconds or whatever. Or you could go the opposite way and push it the other way.
Yeah, Nick Lightbody did something interesting. He's done a lot of performance testing, and at some point he built a FileMaker database, the goal of which was to generate a static website as fast as humanly possible to fit the use cases when the data doesn't change. And there's a lot of that. I mean, it doesn't apply to an inventory system where you're selling products every few seconds. It does apply, I'd say, to a conference where once the conference is all locked in and the speakers and the sessions, that's static for the most part.
Yep.
And, if you want that to run as fast as humanly possible, and if you want to run faster than, let's say, a WordPress website, I read a book on WordPress. Wow, the amount of things that happen before a page displays, it ain't the fastest way to, WordPress ain't the fastest way to display a page. That's for sure. Anyway, that sounds cool. Good topic.
Let's see. So we had so Jeremy's here and he presented. And you say Vince was there and he presented, right? He's still here?
Yeah, presented on FileMaker and Tableau, and how to kind of the latest thinking that we're going through is separation of concerns. So have maybe I back up a little bit, in that Tableau has it's a visualization tool, and it has another application called Tableau Prep, which helps you kind of make sure that data is consistent and accurate or whatever. And but what I've been finding is that FileMaker plays a role if you have a well-constructed system. You basically have curation of data, and it's happening directly in FileMaker. So your data is clean, basically, and using either Web Data Connector or this other connector that we built based on the a Tableau connector API that Tableau published, which relies on the JDBC driver, which is a lot faster than the Web Data Connector, and it works differently. So you can get your data into Tableau a lot faster. Anyway, so instead of building reports and things in FileMaker, we're basically using FileMaker as like just a pure data store. Some visual components of looking at lists and detail screens, but for all the reporting, we're building those in Tableau, and then we're publishing them on the Tableau server, and then we're embedding them directly into FileMaker into a web viewer. So the audience that needs to see the dashboards, they don't have to go elsewhere. They see the dashboards in the main system, and if there's any trends that are showing something that's not going right, you can actually click on the visualization, and there are some ways in Tableau where you can actually have URLs get fired. So we build a custom FMP URL to actually navigate you right back to the underlying data. So it's like having like a really powerful charting component built right into FileMaker.
No, I didn't see a demo. I don't remember you demoing the feedback where you do the FMP URL from Tableau back to FileMaker. You didn't demo that in that presentation, did you?
Yeah, I think I did have a small demo of that. I forget where it was in 20 minutes in or something like that. But yeah, there was something shown there.
Might have to rewatch. No, is Tableau like because this works? Is Tableau something you'd want to go out and buy to make this work, or would there be other solution that if you didn't already have Tableau? Because Tableau is not cheap, right?
No, Tableau's not cheap. Tableau is now owned by Salesforce.
Yeah.
So is Slack. Basically, Salesforce is buying everything.
Yikes.
So anyway, yeah. So Tableau is not cheap, and there was some other people when the recording was presented. There were some other people talking about some alternatives, and I unfortunately don't remember the name of the alternative solutions. But I mean, Microsoft has Microsoft BI, but there's other. And then there's one from Google. That's the thing. I forget what it's called, but it's also, basically visualizing data, etc. But the core, the main difficulty is just the pipeline of the data. Like, how do you like get all the data synchronized so that any new changes, they're reflected in the dashboard. How quick you can turn that around is the real key, because if you can do that, let's say as part of a transaction, then you basically have like a tool that is almost real time, so to speak. Your dashboard is up to date with whatever data is in your system. And it isn't trivial. I mean, there's a lot of steps to go through to get the data over to Tableau, and Tableau has its own mechanism to refresh its dashboards, etc. There's different APIs and things, but it's incredibly powerful, but again, not cheap. So,
yeah, it'd maybe interesting to see, some of these different solutions side by side. But
yeah,
obviously you could just use FileMaker's built-in charting, or you could do some JavaScript charting, or you could do, again, if you have Tableau, if you already have Tableau, I guess that might be the way to go, because your business is probably already utilizing all those dashboards anyway. But yeah, I'd be kind of curious to see those side by side. Like, what would you pick if you didn't have anything to start with?
Yeah, I plan to explore a little bit more some of these other systems and see how they compare. But yeah. Thanks, Chris, for posting that. That's the one, Google Data Studio.
Well, we skip over Todd Geist. So yeah, what's headless CMS?
That's a little bit what I was talking about. He was able to publish data to a website from FileMaker.
Yeah, so that's not the same as presentation that like Robert gave on
That's correct.
like a headless. Yeah, okay, it's a different kind of thing.
John's OData presentation was very good too.
Where's that?
John's OData presentation, right below where you highlighted. You say OData.
Oh yeah.
And, he had to touch on the high points, something that's fairly lengthy. And I know he's across the pond, but it would be nice to have him speak or somebody speak on OData.
Well, we did have. Let's see. Whoops, there.
Sanford
Oh,
Herrera.
right there.
So, yeah.
Has anything updated since a year ago? With
I
OData?
don't know. I don't know, but Steve did say that he was working on a third presentation. I think it was. I'm not sure whether it's ready or not. But yeah, a lot of great content on that one for sure. That's definitely worth watching. Steve's presentation.
Yeah, I like that one.
Has the support been extended to not just Ubuntu, but also the other OS server OSs?
Yeah, I think it has. I guess that is a new thing, actually.
Yeah.
Yeah, that is new. So,
Because I think when Steve gave the presentation, it was only on Unix, right?
it was, yeah, that's right.
And then the implementation is pretty much the same all across, right?
When you say implement,
Well, like,
you
I
mean
don't know.
fact works simply?
Yeah, consistent. You have to
Consistent on all
recode, like if you had it on Unix and you decide you want to go back to Windows for some weird reason, you wouldn't have to recode anything, or
I believe so, yeah.
well, there's nothing else about OData. I'm curious. I didn't see Hans's presentation, but why is it the most inspiring year ever?
Don't know. I think in relation to COVID and the difficulty and stuff like that, there was a lot of things that they've been doing to help different companies. I know that he was involved in with some of the products that they have, integration wise, and helping. I think some I don't know if it was nonprofits or something like that, but anyway, I think just inspiring from what they've been able to do to help people. I watched a little bit, but I don't remember now. Didn't watch the whole thing. So.
Well, before we additional ones. Oh yeah, I saw audit trails, by the way. That always fascinates me because, I mean, yeah, obviously I take advantage of this little auto update field for like, you know, who changed what when, but it doesn't give you a history of what happened to, like if 2 or 3 different changes were made since the last time you looked at it and you don't know what happened in between, then I guess you'd need a whole trail. And so yeah, I think we bought a product a long time ago. It was working for a while and then it kind of broke as we upgraded our systems. And I forget who actually made that. But they presented, I think, at one of DIGFM many years ago. But in any case, yeah, this is a homegrown solution here in Taylor Sharp's. But yeah, I know there's a few different solutions for doing that too. I'd like to see some of those side by side, like what's available either commercially or just building some of your own, like what he did. Did anybody else see that presentation?
I did not. I have a bunch of videos on my to-do list. I've been watching all kinds of things. It's pretty busy over here. I don't remember the name of the commercial product. We've been using Ultralog based code, you know, with some minor tweaks by Ray Culligan, I believe, out of Australia. First introduced through FileMaker Bible, I think, and been pretty happy with that. I know there's a bunch of things out there that I can't speak to because I don't use them. I like Ultralog because it seems relatively comprehensive in that if you make changes to records with like a replace field content, should you choose to do that, that it'll pick that up if you so choose. It's got options, a nice code base, Ultralog. And then Monkey Bread has something quite similar. Seems to have the exception that rather than Ultralog writes a log with all changes, Eric, to your points, you know, sequential changes are maintained. It writes to the current file, so you have an additional step where you have to, like, best practice would be to post those changes to an external file.
And then of course rollbacks are.
It would give you rollbacks and roll forwards.
Well,
you know, once you have a log, it's comprehensive. It should give you rollbacks and roll forwards, and then you'd have to implement that as well. Some code to kind of take you back to where you wanted to be, or take you forward to where you should be.
and of course, whenever people start talking about audits, I'm always imagining it'd be nice if we could audit changes within the schema of FileMaker, like if somebody went through, changed a field, or changed the script, changed the layout. If those kinds of things could be audited comprehensively as well, would be kind of nice. And every time I bring that up, if somebody brings up, you know, well, you know, just go out and get one of your things that will compare the differences, but that's not really the same, right? Unless any of those has that built in where it's like constantly checking and telling you what's changed, and not just what's changed, but who changed it when, right?
Yeah, how are we doing on time, Eric?
Well, seven's not such a bad time. We've gone as late as 7:30. Well, we have a historic one where we went like for 4 hours or something like that.
Oh yeah.
Please, no.
Yeah, we have that video out there.
Yeah, if people are looking for, you know, I need to go to bed or whatever.
Oh yeah, people could drop off and see the rest of it later. Oh yeah, see there we got 4.5 hours. Yeah, so yeah, I don't know if we're allowed to break that record ever, but yeah, we try to wind down before 7:30, and then Steve stops the recording. We end up most of the people leaving, and then some people just hang out and just keep talking. Apparently, unless Steve kicks them off, then some people just stick around and talk for hours.
Right.
So yeah, we're doing all right. I think at the moment, I don't know how exhaustive we want to get on this list, but we really do still want to get some feedback on who you'd like to hear. You could either put that in the chat here or put that in the answers over at that over this community announcement we have for this session. Because maybe for September or sometime later this year, we could get a few of these speakers back and have them
That'd
do better than a 25-minute presentation.
That would be great.
Hey, can you go back, Eric, to the list of sessions? There was one that I watched, which is the top one there on the right, Mastering DevOps and FileMaker. You just passed it.
Oh,
Mastering
there it is.
DevOps and FileMaker. Yeah, very intriguing, and it's a new person I've never heard of, but I can't remember now if he did his research or dissertation on this topic or something along those lines. Just fascinating to see like new tools and new approaches that new people are kind of bringing into the community.
Are you talking about the Devon tool?
Devin tool, yes.
That's really interesting. Some things I think that are really cool about it. Some things that I'm not sure are really thought through because FileMaker is a unique beast, and people can be altering code at the same time, and so you can have multiple, changes happening. And his thinking was, oh, I've made these changes, and I am going to now log that I made these changes. And I'm not sure that he's going into the level of detail to say, under the hood what was changed, but the fact
or what
changes at the same time.
Yeah.
So anyway, it's I haven't dug into it.
Has anybody else looked at that? Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, that was my favorite session as well. I just posted the URL of the application that he made and presented. It's basically a version control for FileMaker. The only downside is that it currently works only for Windows servers. But yes, it was definitely my favorite session. The URL is in the chat.
Thanks. Sure. Is it kind of begin to address my idea of like auditing what changes you're making in files?
Something like that. It's basically, from my understanding from the presentation, was that it was a commenting. Basically, you would commit a version and you would comment on the version. So it's not really going through the XML and diff to identify the differences, but it's in beta. It's just a start. Or I wish it is just start.
Yeah.
So, hey, on the topic, I think it's interesting. People have different approaches. Some people do live development. The tomorrow LA group, there's a presentation on FM comparison. Base Elements also has a diffing tool. I can't say much more. I don't do that much diffing. I just kind of put comments in of the changes I make, and if nothing blows up, I remove the comments later. It's a very professional approach I have. And by the way, nothing generally blows up.
So since
Once
you
every 2 years.
bring up the live development, just out of curiosity, I from what I observed, like changing the schema on the live production thing is really bad. It is changing layouts. Is that like up there too, or is it?
If Chris Moyer is still on the call, I don't want to put him on the spot, but it's a way of ducking the.
Thanks.
It's like a hot potato, but Chris, I'll back you up. I mean, I do a ton of live development, and Eric's question I think is spot on. There are, in my opinion, I'll say it. We're being recorded. I know we're being recorded. I'll say it. There's a ton of live development things that you can do. If you've got impatient customers or entrepreneurial customers who don't work in the medical industry, you can make changes to a live system. Some things are risky, and some things seem to be remarkably safe. And I'll hand it over to Chris if he wants to say anything.
Yeah, I mean, if someone's asking for a brand new report, the layout doesn't exist yet, and you knock in a new layout and wire up a script to get to it, and then as your last step, drop a button on maybe a tile menu or something like that, that's perfectly safe. I've never had a problem with anything like that. Schema is a little riskier, and I tend not to want to work live on tables that people are in. But if I'm adding a brand new module to the system or something like that, and I'm creating brand new tables and then making relationship changes and stuff like that, and then coming out of it, I have not had any trouble with that. And I would never do that over a WAN. But if I'm on the same network, yeah, I don't have trouble doing that. But if you have a layout of any sophistication with tab controls and things like that, and you make a change, the whole thing's going to jump and it's going to go back to its default tab. And that's pretty disruptive to people. So that's the kind of stuff you'd want to do after hours. But, there are some things that seem to be perfectly fine and safe, and other things that, the place better be on fire for you to do it live. You should, typically you want to only manipulate schema after hours if you can help it.
Yeah, I noticed we were on our development server. If we did a bunch of changes on, while it's up on the server, and this is server 18, by the way, it would, if we made like several successive changes, all of a sudden the memory would start spiking, and it wouldn't come back down. It would start, when somewhere. It almost seemed unrelated. Like there'd be, like we do a bunch of imports of data after several successive changes to schema and other things like that, and then we do a huge import, and all of a sudden the memory would spike and wouldn't come back down again. It could get so bad that it would actually lock up the entire server, and so we have all these warnings going off so that doesn't happen. But yeah, it was kind of interesting. I was kind of wondering if that observation's actually a real thing, where going through and changing your file and doing live development can actually cause memory issues and other kinds of things to happen, weirdness to happen.
I haven't seen it over here, and I've been doing live development for like 20 years. Not everything. I do, for some changes, I'll make a backup just before. And by the way, there's an interesting distinction when we talk about live development, is if you're in a system that's hosted on a server and you kick absolutely everyone off, that's much safer than when you have people on the system. So a backup before. I have heard that mucking about with the security area, it could be problematic. I've heard that anecdotally. I've never, not once, had any negative effects from doing live development.
Oh, security? That's not even one I ever thought about. We're constantly having to do security.
I've heard, if keeping my ear to the ground or to the listservs, and what you hear, like, oh, your security stuff is not working so good anymore, kind of error messages that I've heard people talk about. I've not seen that myself. Then again, if I'm going to add or delete accounts, and if I'm using native FileMaker accounts, as I often am, I've got script steps that, don't involve going into the graphical user interface. So that seems safe. I've not been warned against using account management script steps.
Yeah, if I can add a little bit to this topic, I think to me it's really the kind of stuff where there is a golden path, so to speak, and if you step off the path, you better know what kind of ramifications can your modifications can trigger. So I think there is a nice document that was put a while back by, I'm going to say, Chris Irvine and Perrin Smith. And they published that. I think the domain is ScaleFM. And they covered a bunch of things like what is it that we can do that's going to lock the schema, especially if there's sequential numbers involved and things like that. So it's a great read.
Where's that?
ScaleFM.com. It's a good website with good content. ScaleFM.com. It's got a bunch of good content. A lot of stuff about record ID, using the record ID in ways that.
Yeah. I think they made a white paper. I'm going to put that in the chat.
Certainly worth a visit. Anyway, I'll just say, just to my final comment on the topic of live development, it's very frequently a way, like everybody, at least in my neck of the woods, the customers that I have seem to have a sense of risk reward, and one can be too risk adverse and miss out on reward of rapid application development. If you know what you're doing, to Robert's point, you can do a lot of development a heck of a lot faster if you know what's safe and what's risky. So it's a rich, long tradition of live development in the FileMaker platform. So don't be afraid.
And to be fair, I think.
Using.
I'm sorry. I was just going to say, I think since the introduction of the data migration tool, there's a fair bit of the pain that we were having that has been lifted, if I may say. There's still circumstances where you can't necessarily take the whole file down, do the data swap, and then put a new file. But certainly we're not in the space that we were, where trying to move the data around would take much longer. So
yeah, if you're not doing live development, the data migration tool is very, very helpful. If you're not doing live development, it's it's a time and a place for everything. I think there's entire industries where you're not even allowed to do live development.
Yeah, but I'm not sure I would phrase it that way. I would more think like, if you can only do it live, then yeah, do it live. But otherwise, I would favor pushing changes using the data migration tool from a separate development file.
Yeah, some people do that. Some people do that. Live development means you just, you have a change. It's, it is any one of the things that Chris just mentioned, and you just do it and it's done. And it's faster. Doesn't make you a bad person.
It's faster, but it's the same. It's the same speed. And from my experience, my clients are used to having two versions, the dev version and the production version. And when something is wrong, they would go to the dev version, they would start testing, and then it's the same speed. It's just 5 or 10 minutes, depending on how fluent you are with the data migration tool. And of course, what Robert said, you might need to kick everyone out to do the migration. But yeah, basically without the data migration tool, I would agree with you, Tony. It would be much slower to do anything apart from live development. But since the data migration tool, I don't think that there is a good excuse not to be safe.
Well, I think it's good that there's these choices, and I would assert one is faster, even if it's only 5 minutes faster. That's still faster, right? I'm not against. I'm never really against. The data migration tool is awesome. It's wonderful. It's great. People should use it when it's appropriate. I don't think that people choices are good. And there's different ways to do it that fit different use cases, and I think that that's great. Maybe you
Yeah,
only
sure,
want to
everyone.
maintain one server. Maybe you don't want to pay for two servers. It's all good.
Keep the same server. Just one more point. You might get the same delay when someone blocks a table and you have to send them a message and say, could you please exit the record or exit the application? So yeah, but basically, yes, everyone should use the tools that they feel more comfortable with and they prefer.
Yeah, it's all good. And yeah, pros and cons. And I think Chris's presentation has helped. And I actually sent Chris some stuff back channel years and years and years ago. I wrote up 2.5 pages of like, hey, let's talk about what can be done safe and what's more risky. And I posted it on community. And the reason for that is, I have a lot of customers who live in New York, which is a bit of a fast-paced town. I'm not using it as an excuse. I can just tell you we have a ton of clients, some of them rather big, and Fortune 1000, that we do a ton of live development. And part of my job as attending user groups is to say at least one controversial thing at each meeting. So I think I've checked that checkbox today.
Good job.
My job is done. So it's good. It's an awesome platform. So many choices.
Talking about job done, I'm done for today.
All right.
So
Hey, what time is it? What time is it, Vince?
it's
What time you got over there?
4:13 in the morning. So
Wow. Yeah,
For me, it's 5.
Good
I
night,
think
Vince.
I think the reason we let it run past 7 just so we could see how long you'd stay up.
It was a contest. All right,
nice
I
to
quit
chat
you.
with everyone.
So now we have to stay up till 4 a.m. in your own time zone.
Well, I mean, we got off topic on that one. That wasn't actually one of the AutoEnter presentations. Are there any others that people want to bring up?
What's coming up at your next meeting?
Well, that's what I keep asking. But I came over here to see if anybody would comment on what they would want to see. I haven't seen anything. So you could literally, if you could be the only person asking for a presentation, you might get a custom presentation just for you.
Well, a lot of
There's something that happened at Black Hat yesterday, since we seem to be done with AutoEnter. A whole bunch of big players, Splunk, AWS, CrowdStrike, a bunch of large organizations in the cybersecurity space released what they're calling the Open Cybersecurity Schema Framework. And it's basically an interoperability standard for all these different security tools, incident management, et cetera, to have a common interchange format that they can all communicate in. So if you're going to log an event or network traffic or an incident or anything, it's a common logging format. So all these different things can more easily pick up information from other applications or tools and start to correlate them together. And I've just started looking at the spec of the thing. It's all JSON, so it's fairly easy to look through. But it seems like there's an opportunity for FileMaker application developers to participate in this. And so if you're detecting hiccups in a FileMaker app or picking up errors from the server, that you could conceivably write to this format. And so this thing could be hoovered up by other tools that are trying to figure out what the heck's going on if your network's under attack. And you could say, well, here's what FileMaker had to say about it, or here's what FileMaker server had to say about it. I'll paste a couple links into the chat if anybody's interested in looking at this, but I just thought it could be, at least adjacent to the FileMaker development community.
Yeah.
Here's some tweets about it. And this just came out yesterday.
Chris, that's really, you guys have been doing a terrific job of keeping the community apprised. And I think your best presentation was the one that you did for DIGFM that was recorded. Hold on, because I know you did it a couple places. Did you do one for DIGFM? I think you did.
We did, yeah.
Ransomware Roundup?
Yeah, and the community in general, I don't think we made progress through your efforts and others in kind of having an overall solution for our FileMaker community. I don't think we've yet got it, so maybe it's all going to come together and we'll all sleep better.
We shall see. DEF CON starts tomorrow, and you can attend virtually for free if anybody's interested.
So, and the website it was the Black Hat Conference. Can I click on this website? It's safe.
Yes, it's safe.
Okay.
No,
Not going to infect my browser.
All right. Well, I'm gonna head off myself. So good session. It's great seeing everybody.
Likewise.
all right, well, I guess, what do you think, everybody?
I forgot to ask you about the QR code in your background.
Oh, yeah, what about that? Does it work? Oops, not anymore. What about it?
Well, I didn't scan it, but it got me curious as we were just staring at it for a second.
There it is. It's just a link back to the community page. Yeah, it works. And
We're still recording?
yeah, I think. Are we?
Yes, you want it unrecorded?
I don't know. Well, let's see. What's the question? Just wondering where it went to. Yeah, it just goes to the community announcement for this page. It goes to the place where you're supposed to tell us who you want, or what you want to hear next.
Excellent.
So I guess we can stop recording now. Thank you, everybody.
Thanks for the show.